Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more insane HOA and Karen stories coming your way. You won't want to miss them. You won't believe the day my life took a turn from ordinary annoyance to pure chaos. Because it started with the sound of a car door slamming and ended with me standing in my driveway, staring at my mangled bumper, while my HOA's self-proclaimed queen smirked like nothing had happened. Her name, Karen, and if you've ever had a neighbor who thought the world revolved around them, you'll know exactly the type of person I'm talking about. She wasn't just any HOA member. She was the type who strutted around the neighborhood like she owned it. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose, and that smile that wasn't really a smile at all, more like a sneer dressed up in lip gloss. That morning, I had parked my truck right in front of my own driveway. Not on the grass, not blocking anyone, just perfectly fine. But in Karen's world, my truck apparently ruined the curb appeal. She had warned me before, making her little snide comments at HOA meetings. But warnings are one thing, actually acting on them is another. So, there I was, sipping coffee inside when I heard it. BAM! The sound of metal crunching. I rushed outside and froze. Karen's shiny SUV had backed straight into my truck. The bumper was dented, paint was scratched, and the look on her face said it all. She wasn't sorry. In fact, she rolled down her window and casually said, "Well, maybe if you didn't park like a slob, this wouldn't have happened." I couldn't believe it. She hit my car, my property, and acted like it was somehow my fault. I asked for her insurance information, but she just waved her hand dismissively and drove off, leaving me standing there, stunned and fuming. That's when I realized something important. Karen had gotten away with pushing people around for too long. She used the HOA rules like weapons, fining people for tiny things like leaving trash cans out for an extra hour or having the wrong shade of mulch. But this time, she wasn't just fining me. She had damaged my truck and thought she could walk away without consequences. She didn't know it yet, but I wasn't going to let this slide, because tucked away in my garage wasn't just another vehicle. It was a tool big enough to send a very loud, very clear message, an excavator. And if Karen thought hitting my car was fine, well, she was about to find out what happens when you mess with the wrong neighbor. The next morning, I half expected Karen to show up at my door with an apology, or at least an excuse. But instead, she strutted around the neighborhood like nothing had happened. The dent in my truck was still there, gleaming in the sunlight like a battle scar. And every time I looked at it, my blood boiled. I called my insurance company, but of course they wanted Karen's information. Without her admitting fault or giving me her insurance, I was stuck. So I decided to confront her directly. When I knocked on her door, she answered with that smug look, sipping iced tea like she was on vacation. "Karen," I said, trying to keep calm, "you hit my truck yesterday. I need your insurance information." She tilted her head, smirked, and replied, "Oh, please. Your truck was practically asking for it. Besides, it's just a scratch. Be a man and let it go." My jaw clenched. "That's not how this works. You caused damage. You're responsible." But Karen didn't budge. She leaned against her doorframe and, with a tone sweet enough to curdle milk, said, "Why don't you take it up with the HOA? After all, I am the head of the committee. Good luck with that." Then she shut the door in my face. That was the moment it clicked. She thought she was untouchable. She believed the rules only applied to everyone else. And while most neighbors gave in to avoid her drama, I had something different. Leverage. Because behind my workshop sat a bright yellow beast. I used for side construction projects, an excavator. It wasn't just a tool. It was a statement. And if Karen wanted to play games with property damage, maybe it was time I showed her what real consequences looked like. I didn't fire it up right away. Instead, I spent the next few days watching Karen closely. And oh, she didn't disappoint. Every morning, she parked her SUV just a little closer to my driveway, almost daring me to react. She even bragged at the HOA meeting that she was teaching me a lesson about following the rules. But what she didn't realize was that she was walking straight into my plan. Because the excavator wasn't just about intimidation. It was about sending a message, loud enough that the entire neighborhood would remember it. And so late one evening, as Karen once again blocked half my driveway with her shiny SUV, I rolled open the garage door. The sound of the excavator's engine roared to life, echoing through the quiet streets. Neighbors peeked out their windows. Karen stepped onto her porch, eyes wide. This was the moment she realized she had finally pushed me too far. The excavator's engine rumbled like a beast waking from hibernation, its headlights casting long, menacing beams across the cul-de-sac. The sound alone was enough to send the neighborhood into a frenzy. Curtains fluttered open, cell phones popped out, and within seconds, half the block was watching. And there was Karen, standing on her porch in her slippers, jaw slack, clutching her iced tea like it might save her. For once, the smug grin was gone. She shouted over the roar of the machine. "What do you think you're doing?" I leaned out of the cab, my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Since you don't seem to respect my property, Karen, I figured I'd give you a little demonstration of what happens when you mess with it." I lowered the excavator's arm, the massive steel bucket scraping against the pavement with a piercing screech. The sound made Karen flinch, and a collective gasp rippled through the crowd of neighbors who had gathered. The power imbalance had shifted, and for once, Karen wasn't the one in control. Her SUV was parked, half on my driveway, half in the street, as if mocking me. I swung the excavator's arm slowly, deliberately, until the bucket hovered directly over her shiny hood. She shrieked, running forward, waving her arms like a referee. "Stop, that's private property." The irony nearly made me laugh. "Funny," I said, keeping the bucket steady. "That's exactly what I said about my truck." Karen's face turned beet red. She sputtered, "If you touch it, I'll call the police." By now, neighbors had their cameras out, recording every second. The pressure was on Karen, not me. She knew it too. If she admitted on camera that she hit my truck, she'd finally be exposed. If she stayed silent, she risked me lowering the bucket. She was cornered. I didn't actually want to damage her SUV. I wasn't reckless, but I wanted her to think I might. So, I lowered the bucket just enough to press against the hood with a loud metallic creak. Karen screamed, clutching her head like the world was ending. All right, she yelled, her voice cracking. "I'll give you the insurance info. Just stop." That was the victory I needed. I pulled the bucket back, raising it harmlessly into the air. Karen scrambled inside, rifling through her glove box, finally producing the insurance papers she'd refused to hand over days ago. The crowd erupted with whispers and chuckles. For the first time in years, the neighborhood bully had been humbled, and it wasn't the HOA that stopped her. It was me and the excavator. But I wasn't done yet, because humiliating Karen in front of everyone was one thing. Making sure she never tried it again was another. The night of the excavator incident spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire. By the next morning, the video clips were all over our community Facebook page, each angle showing Karen shrieking while I loomed over her SUV in a 20-ton machine. The comments section was brutal. People who had quietly suffered under Karen's HOA tyranny for years were finally laughing. But if you think Karen would take her humiliation quietly, you don't know Karen. 2 days later, I received an official-looking letter taped to my door. Bold letters across the top read, "Notice of violation. According to Karen and her hand-picked HOA board, I was guilty of operating heavy machinery in a residential zone without proper authorization. The fine? $500 per day." I couldn't help but laugh. This was her big comeback? She was so desperate to get revenge that she was inventing new rules out of thin air. But here's the thing. Unlike most of my neighbors, I wasn't afraid to fight back. So when the monthly HOA meeting rolled around, I made sure to be there early, armed with a binder full of evidence. Photos of my damaged truck, the insurance report she finally handed over, and, best of all, the videos neighbors had recorded. The meeting room buzzed with chatter as I walked in. Karen sat at the front table, smug again, clearly believing she'd regained control on her turf. She banged her little gavel and called the meeting to order. "First agenda item," she announced loudly, "is addressing a certain resident's reckless and dangerous use of an excavator." Her eyes locked on me like a laser beam. I let her rant for 5 minutes straight, accusing me of endangering children, damaging community peace, and setting a bad example. Some board members nodded nervously, but the rest of the room looked unimpressed. When she finally paused for breath, I stood up. Calmly, I slid a flash drive across the table to the secretary. "Play the footage," I said. On the screen behind her, the neighborhood video rolled. Karen's SUV blocking my driveway. Karen admitting in her own words, "Your truck was asking for it." And finally, her panicked shrieking as I lowered the excavator bucket. The room erupted. People laughed, others gasped. But the effect was clear. Karen had been caught red-handed. She tried to shout over it, but the noise drowned her out. I raised my voice. "You fined me for something that isn't even in the HOA bylaws. Meanwhile, you damaged my truck and refused to take responsibility. That's abuse of power." By the time I finished, the crowd was clapping. Even the board looked shaken. Karen's face burned crimson. For the first time, she realized she wasn't untouchable. The HOA meeting didn't end the way Karen planned. She had come in expecting to lecture and intimidate. But by the time the videos stopped playing, the room was buzzing with outrage against her. One neighbor stood up, an older gentleman named Mr. Miller. He'd lived there for decades and had been fined multiple times for things as small as his grass being too tall. His voice was steady but firm. Karen, we've all had enough of this nonsense. You've used this HOA like your personal kingdom. And now we see the truth. You're not enforcing rules. You're bullying your neighbors. That single statement opened the floodgates. One by one, residents spoke up, airing years of grievances. Fines for flower beds being too bright, letters about lawn chairs being left out. Even a mother who'd been cited because her kids chalked on the sidewalk. Each story chipped away at Karen's authority. Karen pounded her gavel, her voice rising higher and shriller.
This meeting is out of order.
You all agreed to the rules when you moved here. But nobody was listening anymore. For once, the crowd wasn't afraid. I stepped forward, holding up my insurance report. Here's the reality. Karen damaged my truck, refused to take responsibility, and then fabricated a violation to punish me when I stood up for myself. That's not leadership, it's abuse. The board shuffled nervously. Finally, one of them, a younger woman named Dana, cleared her throat. Given the evidence presented, I motioned that Karen be removed as HOA president, effective immediately. The room went silent. Karen's jaw dropped. You can't do that. I am this HOA. But Dana stood her ground. No, you're not. You work for the community, not the other way around. The vote happened right there. Hands shot up around the room, overwhelmingly in favor of removing her. Only 2 abstained, and not a single hand rose to defend Karen. The gavel she'd clutched like a crown slipped from her hand, clattering onto the table. The queen had fallen. In the weeks that followed, life in the neighborhood transformed. The new board rolled back ridiculous fines, restored fairness, and actually listened to residents. Neighbors who once hid behind closed doors started waving again, relieved the storm had passed. As for Karen, she tried to keep her swagger, but it was gone. Without her title, she was just another homeowner. Except now everyone knew her tricks. She kept her distance. And strangely enough, her SUV was never parked near my driveway again. And me, every time I passed my excavator in the garage, I couldn't help but grin. Not because I had used it recklessly, but because it reminded me of the day the neighborhood finally stood up to a bully. Karen thought hitting my car was fine, but in the end, it was an excavator that crushed her crown.